Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Cinema Exposed. We are finally back from spring break. That's why we didn't have an episode last week, but we have a bunch to talk about in this episode.
I know, there's a lot of things been going on this past week. I mean, you've got new trailers, all kinds of things, and we have huge info about the top 5 at the box office this past week and 2, but we're going to talk about last week and the week before that because it's been a disappointment for some films out there, and definitely gonna pay our condolences to a well-known movie critic. Okay, so time for some really upsetting and saddening news for the entertainment world. Iconic film critic and journalist Ebert died last week on April 4th. He was only 70 years old.
He had cancer, which robbed him of his voice and jaw, and whenever cancer went away, he came back, and then he died. 70, still a young age nowadays. We would like to give our sincere condolences to his family and friends. We are so sorry for your loss.
So, did the Evil Dead remake massacre the box office this weekend?
Or did Jurassic Park prove to be unstoppable 20 years later in 3D?
Evil Dead did take the #1 spot, but they only brought in like 26 million, which is not really high.
No, compared to other movies such as, I don't want to throw it in because they're franchise movies, but stuff like Harry Potter and Twilight, those opening weekend makes millions of dollars, and this only just made 26 million.
Hey, honestly, that's good for a horror movie to even take the #1 spot. Even with sticking to the basics and adding just a whole lot more gore, I'm so surprised they even took #1. I figured they would have probably gotten #2, but there were still people out there who liked the film.
Yeah, and there were people that did not like the film. I know some critics or even some fans came back and said that they really didn't like the film, but it proved to be great. It was #1, so congratulations to the Evil Dead.
At #2,
it was a tie between G.I. Joe, Retaliation, and The Croods. Both brought in about $21 million. G.I. Joe doesn't really surprise me because a lot of fans like the original one, and then with the pushback because of Channing Tatum, The Croods kind of surprised me because of course it is an animation film, and families like to go to theaters, of course they do, but really on a Friday night, Saturday night, I find more people flock to stuff like The Evil Dead because it's a horror movie, or action movies, or romance movies, or But with G.I. Joe 2, it didn't really flare with critics, but they're still making a statement with the film, and now there's talks of possibly having a G.I. Joe 3. So we'll see how that progresses later on, because since the tiebreaker, there's really no one sitting in that #3 spot. So, #4, Jurassic Park 3D. Yeah, I guess it didn't prove to be unstoppable after all, because it barely even got the #4 spot, which is kind of weird, but... And it breaks my heart too, because I love Jurassic Park, and then they're making the 4th one. You would think since they were making the 4th one all these years later that people would want to go flock to see this movie to see how great it was, but I guess, maybe since the DVD's still out there,
I think the 3D version of it changed audience perspective on it, maybe.
Yeah.
It probably didn't make it much more appealing as what they've been advertising.
Yeah, that is true. I find lately they've been doing a lot with 3D. They've been taking on movies, for example, like Titanic, and putting it in 3D, and I don't know if people actually like 3D. Everyone thought that 3D was going to be like this big thing, and they're making personally, I don't like it. It gives me a headache with the glasses. I feel like 3D should just be at parks like Disney, with games and stuff, but God, it still breaks my heart that people did not want to go see Jurassic Park. It's such a great movie. Who does not love a movie packed with dinosaurs? I just don't understand. But anyways, coming in at #5 is Olympus Has Fallen. It looks like, I really don't know what to say about that movie. They have another one coming out with Channing Tatum.
Starring Channing Tatum, called White House Down. It's got a similar plot to it. I've seen the trailer. I don't think it's going to do as well as Olympus Has Fallen when it first debuted a couple weeks ago. I mean, another thing, you know, Stephenie Meyer's new film, The Host, didn't do too well either when it first came out 2 weeks ago. It debuted like at number 3 or 4, and it has dramatically dropped within 1 week to number 8. So it's definitely not doing well at all, because the first weekend it only made 10 million, which is not as low, because I know Haywire made 9 million, which is pretty low. But being at 10 million for The Host, I mean, I guess people just weren't feeling the movie, I guess.
And you know, you would think that it would be a high grossing movie, because Stephenie Meyer, it's her book, and of course she wrote the Twilight series, and people love Twilight, so you think that those fans would be dedicated enough to want to go watch this movie. But I guess maybe they heard bad things about it, read reviews, and it's just not what people want to see.
That is true. But after this break, we're going to come back and tell you guys some new things that came out this past week while we were off.